Welcome, everyone. I think we can get started and people will be coming in. But I am Darla Cooper. I'm the executive director for the RP group, and we're so happy, excited to be with you this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you are in the world, to share some of our initial work on our African American transfer tipping point study. And so myself and my colleague, Katie Brohan, are going to kind of take you through what we found in the research, and then we're going to turn it over to the real stars of this show, which are the people who are very gracious with their time during the study, and also to join us here today to share their experiences as students and as the practitioners, the educators that work with our students. So I think we can go ahead and let's get started. So for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, we usually like to just let you know that the RP Group, which stands for the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges, is an independent nonprofit that works alongside the California Community College system. And we primarily offer professional development. We serve um, as serving in our role as the membership organization for the researchers and planners. And then we also do research, which is why we're here today, to share some of our most recent research with you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start us off with just an overview of the original study, our Through the Gate study, and how we got to this current study that we're here to talk about today. Next slide, please. So again, our original study, we wanted we felt like there was a group of students out there, just based on our experience, that had done all or most of their transfer requirements, but weren't transferring. And so we wanted to learn a little bit more about that, see, who are these students? How many of these students are there out there? So we went and mapped this landscape and kind of came up with this idea that transfer is not dichotomous, either you do it or you don't, but that there's a continuum that students are on as they're progressing through meeting those transfer requirements and ultimately transferring. And so that's what this illustration is. And most of our work in Through the Gate has focused on those first three students. If you're looking at the top of the graphic, the transfer achievers, who are the students who achieve transfer. The student who is there at the gate, meaning that they've completed, they've earned an ADT, an associate degree for transfer, or they've earned 60 transferable units with at least a 2.0, and they've completed both their transfer English and math requirements. So they're right there at the gate. And then the person in purple there, the near the gate, are the students who have the 60 units with the 2.0, but have not yet completed both math and English. They may have one or the other or neither, but they're not there. And so again, most of our work focuses on those three groups of students, but we did want to acknowledge that there were students, the momentum students, who are the ones who have gotten to 45 units, but not yet 60. So they do have momentum towards transfer. And then our transfer explorers are the students who had earned 12 units, transferable units, with over a 6-year, at least 12 units, but not yet 45 in a 6-year period. So they have been enrolled in our system for at least 6 years. Next slide, please. So when we looked at this, these were just a few of the key findings, kind of takeaways, is that more than half of those at the gate and near the gate students had exited our system without any kind of credential, no degree, no certificate. And again, the timing of this dates back to when we were, because we're looking at data from, we have to look at 6 years. So we were looking at some data from years ago, and these were kind of pre-AB 705 students. So in this particular case, math was a significant barrier. And I believe, I haven't done this for a while, so I believe the number is somewhere in the range of 92% of the students, of our near the gate students, were missing the math requirement. So clearly math was an issue. Time is the enemy, meaning that when we looked at students of those, once they kind of hit that near the gate milestone, if they didn't transfer within 1 year of hitting that milestone, their chances of transferring were significantly decreased. So there was more this idea of needing to capitalize on students' momentum once they're hitting those 45 and 60 unit marks. And then finally, what we found is when we look at, again, those three groups, the transfer achievers, the near the gate, the at the gate student, you just look at that population, about 66% of them had transfer overall. But when we broke that figure down by race ethnicity, what we found was the African Americans had the highest chance of transferring among all races and ethnicities. The number from that 66% was 75% for African American students. And then when we look at we run what we call the odds ratios, what we found was that compared to white students, our African American Black students were twice as likely to transfer than remain kind of near the gate, just kind of staying at that place. So I said that was one of those findings where it's like, we need to know more about this. So we pulled it together, figured out how we might want to study this, and that is how we got to our African American transfer tipping point study. Try to understand how again, the issue is that not enough of our African American Black students are getting to that near the gate status. So again, once they get there, they're most likely to succeed, but not enough of them are getting there. And that's what we're trying to understand is what is that tipping point, right? What is that thing that shifts to where the African American students become the most likely to transfer? Next slide, please. So just going to introduce very briefly the current study and then turn it over to Katie to kind of walk us through, but let's go to our next slide. Just wanted to give a shout out. Some of you, I can see you out there, our advisory committee, just thank you, thank you, thank you. So helpful, so engaged, so involved, took time out of many of these everyone's busy schedule. We have students, we have faculty, we have administrators, we have university people. I mean, some of you probably recognize these names. All of their information is on our website, but just so helpful in helping us. There were a few places in looking at these results where we went, what do we're not sure how to present that or the best way to present that. And so this group was instrumental in helping us figure out and plays a big role in what we're able to share with you today, how we're sharing it with you. We're going to share at the end of the webinar the initial set of briefs that came out of this research. So can't thank this group enough for all of their time and their insights, their attention, their engagement, just super, super valuable. I think that's where I hand it over to Katie to walk us through the findings.
Awesome. Thank you, Darla. And you guys will see Dr. Wendy Sedlak on this slide. She is our amazing program officer from the Lumina Foundation who is funding this work so graciously. And we just want to do a huge shout out to Lumina broadly, but also to Wendy because she's just really been a true thought partner in this work. So thank you. All right. So Darla set us up for why these questions are important, why we really need to figure out how do we get our African American and Black students at least near the gate, because we know now that if we can get them at least near the gate, they're actually the group most likely to make it through the gate to transfer, but we have to figure out how to get them there, all right? And so the guiding questions for this study, which we call our African American Transfer Tipping Point Study, are one, what factors, both academic and non-academic, contribute to African American and Black students' likelihood of reaching the tipping point? And which programs and practices are associated with greater persistence to and through the tipping point and ultimately through the transfer gate? Okay. And so I do want to flag that while we're sharing findings today, these are only findings from the first two phases of a three-phase study, and we're going to plug that third phase at the end of this webinar. But we have so far come across very important findings that are going to drive this third phase and that we think that all of you today are going to find incredibly compelling. So the first phase, which I'll get into the data for in a second, is we wanted to look at student course taking patterns. So we really did a deep dive into student course taking patterns to determine the key point or points at which they're most likely to drop out versus to go on and transfer, right? And then we also wanted to look at the factors that are going to influence that likelihood. So really quantitative in nature for the researchers out there. And then phase two is that we conducted interviews and focus groups with some of the folks on the panel today, as well as others, specifically at colleges that we identified as having higher success rates when it comes to African American and Black student transfer. We wanted to learn, what are these colleges doing that are helping them when it comes to facilitating transfer for their African American and Black student population. However, we realized this is just a sample, right? We conducted 2 focus groups with students. We conducted 6 interviews across these 5 colleges. We have a lot of hypotheses now. We actually have a ton of insights from these conversations, but to make sure we fully test out those hypotheses and also capture new information and new factors that we haven't yet uncovered, there is a third phase to this work. We're about to launch a statewide survey of African American and Black students across the California community colleges, those who have yet to transfer and those who transferred recently. I'll tell everyone a little bit more about that at the end, but just so you know, we're sharing today findings from phase 1 and from phase 2. So who did we look at? Who was our population? Well, we received data from the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office. We looked at 6 first-time cohorts enrolled at a California community college between 2011 and 2016, and we tracked them over 6 years. So we looked at their outcomes, giving them up to 6 years to transfer. Right? The students in the population had to have completed at least 12 transferable units with passing grades and not yet gone on to enroll in a university. We're calling these throughout the study transfer motivated. They've indicated through their transcript that they likely are interested in transfer. Okay. Ultimately, across these 6 first-time cohorts, we had a sample of about 69,000 African American and Black students and about 780,000 non-African American and Black students. So quite the sample. It is the entire universe of students who meet these criteria in the CCC system. Now, what did we look at? We looked at a lot, and we always show these slides, not for everyone to memorize all of these factors, but just to give you a sense of how many different factors we hypothesized might be related to the African American and Black student transfer journey that we had access to, right? These factors were student level characteristics and college level characteristics. So the next slides will walk you through more. It's more than you see here. But first and foremost, we look at student characteristics. You see a whole host up here. There's a reason you see 3 of these crossed out, because people will always ask us, why didn't you not include these 3 factors? We had access to this data, but once we got the data and looked at it, it wasn't clean enough for us to feel confident in including these variables in our data set. So that's something to consider as we move forward, because these are 3 very important variables. Okay, so I just wanted to call that out. So these are our student characteristics. We looked at a lot of academic predictors, right? We're looking at an ultimately academic variable, whether the students go on to transfer. So of course, it's not surprising that we thought that their academic trajectories might play a big role, right? So we look at things like their high school diploma, when they graduated high school, whether they participated in an orientation when they came to their community college, whether they participated in academic counseling and when, whether they went to the transfer center on their community college campus, their major, whether it was a STEM major, whether they had an ed plan. We looked a lot at the course taking and how part-time or full-time the student was, the percent of terms within their academic tenure that they were full-time, whether they were full-time in their first year, because we had different thoughts about how these factors might influence their trajectories, right? We looked at whether a student passed transfer level English and or math specifically in their first year. Darla mentioned before that to get near the gate, you had to be missing at least one of the two, transfer level English or math, but we all know to get through the gate, you need both completed. So we thought perhaps timely completion might be especially salient. We looked at a lot of different unit milestones, how long it took a student to complete 6, 12, 15, 24, 30, and what's not on here is 45 units, right? And how successful they were in terms of attempts versus completion. We also looked at whether they were ever put on academic probation. So that's academic standing there, right? So anyway, I'm reading a laundry list, but it's just to show you we had lots of different thoughts, not only on the variables that might be involved, but how to conceptualize those variables. But then we also realized that college characteristics might play a role too. So we looked at factors such as the percent of African-American and Black students at that college, the percent of African-American and Black faculty at that college. We broke that out into adjunct faculty versus all faculty. We also looked at what's called a proportionality index, and that's the alignment between the proportion of African-American and Black students at the college and the proportion of African-American and Black faculty at the college, right? We looked at the college's overall transfer rate, the transfer rate specifically for their African-American and Black student population, equity gaps, and then other factors such as urbanicity, size, whether or not they had an Umoja group on campus, and ADT related factors such as completion and offerings. So a lot of different variables, but I will say it's not everything in the kitchen sink. It's all of those things we think might play a role, right? And so to start narrowing that list down, we did some decision tree modeling. And this is to really hone in on which factors are most predictive of whether a student, an African-American or Black student, makes it near the gate or further. So when you see NTG plus in this presentation, that's what I'm referring to. So we knew from the data that across this population that I mentioned, these 6 cohorts, an African-American or Black student's overall chance of making it near the gate plus, if not through the gate, was 35%. But then we saw that certain factors significantly influenced that 35%, right? So the thing that most influenced whether they were part of that 35% was whether or not they completed 30 or more units specifically in their first 2 years. These are transferable units, I should say. So keep that 35% in your head. Now, if a student did complete 30 or more transferable units in their first 2 years, that 35% rises up to 66%. If they don't complete 30 or more units in their first 2 years, that likelihood goes down to 24%. Okay. So we've said, okay, well, is there anything else that then mediates that relationship? So now we know, like I just mentioned, you have a 66% chance if you complete 30 or more units in 2 years. Well, what if you complete 45 or more units in 2 years? How does that change things? Because that was the second most predictive factor. If you complete 45 or more units in your first 2 years, that likelihood goes up to 85%. Not too bad. If you complete 30 or more, but you don't complete 45 or more, that 66% goes down to 55. Okay. Now, for the students who did not complete 30 or more units, of course, the next most relevant factor couldn't be 45 units, right? So the next most salient factor for those students was whether or not they stayed in good academic standing. The alternative, more negative phrasing of this is, did they ever get put on academic probation? So if a student does not complete 30 or more units, but they do stay in good academic standing, they're never put on probation, that 24% rises up to 32%. Still not great, but it is better than 24. However, if they're put on academic probation at any point in their academic career, that goes down to 16%. Okay. So you see, all in all, right now, there's 2 levels of factors that significantly change the likelihood. That 35% now can range from 16% all the way to 85%, depending on these 3 factors. I'm going to take it one level further because there were more factors that were predictive. So we now know that there's an 85% chance of making it at least near the gate if you complete 45 or more units in the first 2 years. What if you do that and you stay in good academic standing? Doesn't change all that much. It goes up to 88%, but still better. But if you don't, if you are put on academic probation at some point, that will go down to 69%. So it has a big influence, even though the student has made it through 45 or more transferable units. And then on this far right-hand side, now we know that 16% are for students who don't complete 30 or more units, and they are put on academic probation, so they don't stay in good academic standing. So we know they couldn't complete 30 or more units in the first 2 years, but what if they could complete 24 or more? If they could, that 16% rises up to 28%. Again, not what we're looking for, but it is better than 16. And then if they do not complete 24 or more units in the first 2 years, that goes down to 15%. Okay. So this was just one example of a whole lot of models that we ran. And I'm just going to show you this figure here. This is what you're going to see in the brief that just got released this morning. It's the exact same data I just showed you on all those other slides, but it's just a little more visually appealing, if you will. But what we found and what you saw in those previous slides is that it was the units that rose to the top, right? It was 30 or more units. It was 45 or more units. And we thought, okay, we all gathered as a team and we thought, well, that's not very interesting. You know, sure, but we had that huge list of factors that we all thought would be super predictive. And really what was coming up to the top was the unit thresholds. So we know that's important. There's no going around it. But then we thought to ourselves, well, then what predicts whether they complete 30 or more units in 2 years? What predicts whether they complete 45? What predicts whether they complete 15 or more units in the first year? Because all of those things are going to be the precursors to then making it near the gate or further. So the model that I just showed you, we ran that multiple times where instead of the end goal being getting near the gate, it was 30 or more units. It was 45 or more units. It was 24 or more units, and it was 15 or more units. The 15 is in 1 year, the rest are in 2. And when we ran those decision tree models, kind of skip that, what we found was that there were certain factors that kept rising to the top in terms of always showing up in all 4 of those models. Okay. So I'm going to pause. I know everyone's doing some reading, but there were 17 factors that did show up. But these 7 factors that are outlined in the blue are the ones that were coming up very early and very often in the model. It became clear when we all sat down as a team and looked at all of these models, these were coming up time after time. Passing of both transfer level English and math, passing of just one, if not both, right? Whether or not the student was ever put on academic probation, whether or not they came from a low income background, whether or not they received disabled and special population services, and whether or not they saw an academic counselor. We looked at this a lot of different ways. We looked at it in the first year, in the second year, and ever. It kept coming up time and time again. And so we said, okay, we're going to put these all into a model. And we're going to see of all these factors, what's going to show up and how salient are they in terms of predicting whether or not the student ultimately makes it at least near the gate, because that is sort of our be all end all, right? And so we conducted a bunch of logistic regressions for the researchers in the room, but essentially what it spits out are odds ratios. How a given factor changes the likelihood of whether or not a student is going to make it near the gate or further. And so what I'm going to show you here are those odds ratios. And so the factors that above and beyond predicted whether or not a student, an African-American or Black student, made it near the gate or further, had to do with transfer level course taking in the first year. So an African-American or Black student who passed both transfer level English and math in their first year was 310% more likely to make it at least near the transfer gate than an African-American or Black student who did not. Now, if you look at passing one but not the other, right? So if you pass transfer level math but not English in the first year, still increases that likelihood by 160%. That's not too shabby, right? Conversely, if you pass transfer level English but not math, 70%. Again, not too shabby. The thing is, this 310% is so large that it probably makes us think differently about these two, but these are incredibly predictive, okay? So if a student can pass one but not the other in the first year, That's fantastic. If they can pass both, it's a whole new ballgame. Okay. Then we looked at whether they received academic counseling. If they received academic counseling, they had a 60% increased likelihood of making it at least near the transfer gate as an African American or Black student who did not receive academic counseling. Okay. And we look at participation in Umoja, right? And we saw, and again, this arrow looks small relatively speaking, but this is incredibly statistically significant. Again, for the researchers in the room, this matters. We know this matters. It's also practically significant. Students who participated in Umoja were 20% more likely to make it at least near the gate than students who did not participate in Umoja. Right? Then there were other factors that decreased the likelihood of making it near the gate. So students who came from low-income backgrounds were 20% less likely to make it at least near the gate. And throughout this, I should say, this is specific to African American and Black students. So again, African American and Black students who come from a low-income background are 20% less likely to make it near the gate as compared to African American and Black students who are not from low-income backgrounds. African American and Black students who receive disability supports are 20% less likely to make it through the gate. And then lastly, African American and Black students who are put on academic probation during their time at community college are 70% less likely to make it at least near the gate compared to African American and Black students who are not put on probation. Pause for a quick second, let it all sink in. I'm going to highlight two things on this graph because people then always ask the next question, well, how does this compare to non-African American and Black students? How does this compare to white students, right? It's the obvious question. So interestingly, a lot of this figure looked similar, right? And we have a whole technical report where you can get tons of more detailed information, more than you're seeing here. This is the broad strokes overview. Two things I do want to point out because they're going to come into play when we talk later about the interviews and focus groups we conducted, because there were two places we needed to dig deeper specifically. One, so I mentioned before that 60%, if an African American or Black student received academic counseling, they were 60% more likely to make it near the gate. That's great. But a non-African American or Black student who received academic counseling, that increased their chances by 110%. So for some reason, it's not as impactful. Still impactful, but why is it 60 versus 110, right? So that's something we're going to talk about later. And then the other thing to point out was if you look at what this gray arrow looks like for our non-African American and Black students, it's very similar in terms of it decreases their likelihood of making it near the gate, actually by slightly more. If we're getting technical, it was 71% for African American and Black students and 76% for non-African American and Black students, right? So very similar in terms of the negative impact it has. However, our African American and Black students are much more likely to be put on probation in the first place. So the negative impact is more likely to impact a Black student than a non-Black student. This is where I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Cooper, who is going to talk about the next part of the study.
Thank you, Katie. So we got these results, and as I indicated earlier, in places where we really tapped into our advisory committee was why these, what's going on, and we felt that we needed to talk to the people. We needed to talk to, primarily, of course, first students, and trying to get a little bit more insight into what might be underneath these findings. And then again, we also wanted to talk to our practitioner colleagues who are working with these students, day in and day out to find out, well, what are you seeing? Like when we share this finding with you, what does it say to you? So let's go to the next slide. So we frame these in terms of why blank X matters. So when we talk to, again, our students and our practitioners, especially, from our students, what we found, what we heard, what they shared was that some of them were avoiding general counseling and the transfer center because at their particular campus, they didn't feel heard or seen or valued or respected, and they didn't see themselves. And not just, obviously we're talking about, being able to see a counselor that looks like you, but also to see a reflection of yourself and your culture in those spaces. And so students were shying away from going to that. Related to that, they were much more likely to say that they benefited from when they were able to get counseling, academic counseling within our special programs like Umoja and EOPS. So I said, we're going to be sharing quotes throughout. I'm not going to, you can see that some of them are lengthy. We are going to make, these quotes are in the briefs. We're going to make the PowerPoint available. This recording is there. But these quotes really do illustrate, again, some of that, what is it? What does it mean to not be seen, to be valued, to feel respected in these spaces? And so it gives you a bit of context for that. And this particular quote, this particular quote is highlighting how for a Black student to go into the counseling center, maybe there's some trepidation there. There's some concern, there's some trust concerns, and just being able to, feel comfortable enough, feel safe enough to go in and kind of lay yourself out in terms of who you are, what's happening in your life, everything that, again, our students are whole people with whole lives and rich backgrounds and experiences that they're bringing all of that with them into that space. And it can be disconcerting and uncomfortable to not know, can I trust you with all of this, with me, with everything I have that going on. So that's really kind of what the student is sharing in this quote. All right, now we can go to the next one. So we talked about probation, academic probation. And so again, it was interesting, and I'll just share with you, I used to be a counselor in another life, and I worked primarily with students on academic probation. So this is something near and dear to my heart and my experience. And it was interesting hearing from the students how they reacted to this idea of probation, of academic probation, and how devastating it can be to get that notice, and that the requirements that come with being on probation presents a challenge. Sometimes the counseling office is not open when the student is available, but they have to see a counselor in order to get registered. So that's what they shared. And then the other piece is that being on probation can impact your eligibility for financial aid, which then impacts your ability to go to school. And there's this kind of they described it almost like a vicious cycle that they get trapped in. And so the quotes here is the student saying, feeling like the college had given up on them by putting them on, being put on probation, to where it's the college is like, well, you messed up, figure it out, right? We're here, if you need help, but it's on you to figure it out. And no one's asking these questions of, in some cases, what's going on? What's happening? How do we help you move forward? How do we help you get off probation specifically? Next slide. So again, the other piece which may be occurring to many of you out there is the word probation, and that it can be triggering, and it brings up thoughts of our criminal justice system. And we won't go into how disproportionately African Americans are criminally and justice impacted. But I think it's worth noting that, and again, the students noted this, is when they hear that word, that's what pops into many of their heads. And again, if you think about criminal justice probation, that comes with the loss of benefits, right? When you're in that system, and then they see the same thing repeating in academic probation. And so that's what the students were sharing with us in terms of that those are the kind of thoughts that enter into their mind when they hear this term of probation. I think there's a second quote here about, again, the sensitivity to this particular population and other populations of people of color that are disproportionately impacted in our criminal justice system, and just thinking about the language and how that might be impacting our students. So let's go to this. So again, we asked the practitioners about this, and this was an interesting juxtaposition because the practitioners, are coming from the place of, so things didn't go well. We've got systems in place to catch you. It's a fail safe. It's a safety net. And we're saying, and we're intervening. We're saying, please come see us so that we can help you. And so it's just interesting to see those two different perspectives about the same thing. And so this quote, from one of our practitioners is that, again, that safety net, that fail safe, to where it's like, we want to help. We're here to help you. And so we've put things in place to kind of, let's say, direct you to see us to get that help so that we can get you back into good standing. Next slide, please. So Umoja, again, for those of you who may or may not know, I'm the board president for Umoja, so this is very near and dear to my heart, and it was lovely to hear the students talk about the significant role that Umoja played in their success. And a big part of that was the counseling and getting that counseling. But I think what I heard from the students is that in the Umoja program, they are seen as whole. They are treated as whole, whole person with a whole life, again, that's in the present, in the past, in the future, and that they care about more than just your academics. They want to know about your mind, your soul, your body, your health, mental, physical, your family. And so that's really, again, what we heard about is just that holistic treatment from our Umoja coordinators and counselors and faculty and their peers as well. I love to share the story. I did some focus groups years ago with Umoja students. And in one particular one, there was a student who shared a story about how she was, having a rough semester and she was thinking about dropping out. And she mentioned it to like one person, another student in the program. And within hours, she had like at least 20 text messages from her peers, from the coordinator, the faculty saying, don't drop out, come see me, come talk to me, I'll help you. That's Umoja. That's the Umoja community. Gonna make me tear up. It's very special. Okay, so instructional faculty. I hopefully no one is surprised by this. The classroom matters. We tied this specifically to that finding about English and math, right? Transfer level English and math. And so we kind of, asked the student, because we can't get at this, the importance of faculty through you saw the factors, right? You saw what we could put into the quantitative data in that model. But we know if that's our finding, that English and math and getting through the English and math is key, then the people helping students get through that must also be key. So we asked the students about that, and they told us lovely stories about faculty who were so supportive, so caring, so patient, really cared about their success and tried to help them succeed, not just in that class, but trying to give them the tools to succeed as a student, in college, and helping them learn about themselves, helping build their confidence in themselves, and so key. In terms of their ability to get through. And the students talked about finding the right teacher for them, where they had a good fit in terms of their learning and the teacher's teaching, and that they were able to do that. This particular student is kind of sharing a little bit about that, finding the right student. And if you don't notice, the very first words of this quote is the third time around. So this student had to take English 3 times before being able to pass it, and really credited this teacher, who happened to be African American, but that you can see the effort, the caring that the teacher put into helping her again, not just be successful in that class, but become a better writer and a better student. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, can we go back? I thought there was one more, but I want to talk about the other piece. We did hear from the students, and they're going to share with us the flip side of this, and where where that fit wasn't right, and the challenges that presented. So I just wanted to kind of set that up. So let's go. We're going to stop talking for the most part, and I'm going to enter a discussion again with the stars of this, the people who participated in our student focus groups and our interviews. And so their names are here, but I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And I think just for sake of being organized, I will call on you so that people don't talk over each other. So let's start with our two practitioners, Kalinda, Dr. McLean.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kalinda McLean, and I'm the Umoja Coordinator and Counselor at Los Angeles Pierce College. Nice to be with you all.
Thank you. And please, Clarence Banks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clarence Banks, Director for the Center for Black Culture and Student Success, and also a Director of our Umoja Aspire program and our new Amend program here at Mount San Antonio College. And very excited to share space with all of you, and hopefully we can say something today that can help you along your path.
Great. So glad that you're here. And then our students. Let's start with Rochelle.
Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Petrie. I'm in my second year at Mount San Antonio College, and I am studying sociology and psychology.
Thank you. Unique, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Unique McAlpin Carter. I went to the College of San Mateo, where I graduated and transferred, successfully to Cal Poly Humboldt, and I am now at Clark Atlanta University doing my master's in counseling.
And Ariana, please.
Hi everyone. My name's Ariana. I'm currently a new transfer at Samuel Merritt University for nursing. I most recently graduated from the LA Community Colleges with 3 associate degrees, AA in natural science and mathematics, an AA in social and behavioral sciences, and associate of science in pre-allied health.
Wonderful. So our first questions are is kind of a show of hands among our 3 students. I'm just going to ask them to read this, and you can just literally physically raise your hand, or if you want to do the other one, you can do that as well. But please let us know if you were the first in your family to go to college. Okay, it's 3 for 3. Next, did you take transfer level English and/or math in your first year? Take. Okay. Now, did you pass transfer level English and math in your first year? All right, you can say more about that later. I love that. Just kind of maybe a little, sort of, kind of. Okay. So we've got some specific questions that we're going to direct to each student, and then we've got some questions that we'd like all of them to chime in about. So we're going to start with Ariana, and just asking you to share some of your experiences in terms of passing transfer level English and math at the community college.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a bit unique because I did not take transfer level English or math until the last term or semester before I was getting ready to head out. And that was mainly because I had a few unsuccessful attempts leading up to that point where I had to drop the course to obtain a W for multiple reasons, but most importantly, or the most challenging thing I experienced was the lack of connection and understanding between myself, the material, and the professors. When I speak on, I'm going to start with math, but I took statistics 4 times before I was able to complete it and understand it enough to move forward. Prior to that 4th time, I had taken it online because it was during COVID, but with that, I also struggled with having a connection with my professors that allowed proper time to connect, to gain a better or deeper understanding on the material. And I also had my own chip on my shoulder because I personally struggled with even having to take it in the first place, because I came from a high school where the actual graduation requirement fulfilled the requirements of your first year in junior college. And when I met with my counselors, that particular detail went overlooked, and I had to take like a math entrance exam, and even with taking the AP exam. And so I was a little frustrated, and going back into what I said about waiting until the end, a lot of that had to do with just feeling like I wasn't being heard. And in those conversations, there was not a lot of understanding on where I came from, because I actually started at a CSU, and I was on academic probation with that. And to try to wrap it up and keep it short, me going into a junior college, there was a lot of things that needed to kind of be talked about to kind of understand where that was going. But in short, I experienced a bit of trouble in trying to navigate what that looked like. So I didn't get to take it until I was on my way out.
Thank you, Ariana. So our next question is for Rochelle, and we did, just so that you know, we did check with her to make sure that we could ask her this question in this space, in this forum. But in the focus group that you participated in, you did mention that you at some point were on academic probation. So are you able to share a little bit about your experience being on probation and trying to get off probation as well?
Yes, so as my experience is that I had been out of school for over 25 years. So I'm a non-traditional student returning back to college. And I took classes that I thought were equivalent to the last time I was in high school, so which was in 98. So returning back to school, I took those level classes, and with that gap in between schooling, I did not succeed in math. So I did I returned back to school during the pandemic. So with the language barrier, the mask, and then the negative relationship that I already had with math, it just kind of like escalated. So I did have to drop that class. Didn't know that that would affect the number of units that I had to keep for my education. So that put me on academic probation. That really put me like in a devastating state, because the word probation for me just made me feel like I was a criminal. It made me feel like I did something wrong. I didn't understand what that looked like as far as my finances, because it does affect the amount of money that you receive in order to continue school. So like the first 2 semesters of returning back to school, I literally fought for my life, because academic probation just kind of like put a dark cloud over my whole experience. So fast forward, what it did in in the next 2 semesters, it made me like overcompensate. So now I'm like overworking or overdoing it because I don't want that label. With the probation, the only thing that I really didn't understand or appreciate was that even if as a criminal in probation, when you get off probation, you see a probation officer, there's some type of program. In school, I really didn't feel like anyone was focused on what caused the probation or what caused the situation. Even though I am always meeting with counselors, the people that you have to talk to in order to get that negative mark off of your record, they never reached out to me. So I never felt like I was able to like explain my story to anyone. So what it did for me now is like, it makes me everything is like I overdo it. Like I'm taking too many classes, or I'm going to tutoring 3 times a week, because I'm like, I don't want that label on my record anymore. So now it's like looking at the slides and seeing the numbers, it's like, oh, so you either drop out, or at my extreme, you either overcompensate, which can cause even further damage, because you're really focusing on something that is pretty much hard to achieve, because you're never going to be able to make up that time that you lost, or get your name back, because people look at, I feel like I had like a label on me, or even when I go see a counselor, I feel like that's the first thing they can see. Like they can see that I withdrew, or they can see any negative marks. So I'm always trying to prove. And the good thing about the emoji program is that I feel like I don't have to prove myself. Like I'm accepted for exactly who I am, even though they have access to my file. Like I don't feel like that's the first thing that they see. Like, oh yeah, she was on probation. Like I don't feel like that when I'm involved with emoji. So
Thank you for your generosity in sharing your experience with us about that. Before we move away from the topic of academic probation, I just wanted to give Unique and Ariana a chance to chime in if they had thoughts about academic probation and how it affects African American students in particular.
Yeah, sure. I can start. I spoke briefly before about how I actually came from a CSU. So my freshman year of college at CSU Sacramento, my mom was hospitalized. So I spent a lot of my time between working 2 jobs and being a full-time student. That her being hospitalized and me being the oldest had a big impact, because I had to work to not only maintain what I had to do at school, but a lot of responsibilities for the household fell on me too. I ended up pretty much failing my first semester, and it put me on academic probation. And when going through the process of the appeal, I didn't really have any help, and I didn't know that there was like a underlying right thing to say. I just told my truth and expressed that it wasn't a reflection of who I was as a student, and that I deserved a chance and opportunity to redeem myself. Well, unfortunately, it was rejected, so I was no longer a student at Sac State. So I had to navigate what that new thing looked like for me, which was junior college. But that transition was me figuring it out by myself as a first generation college student, never having anyone relate to in terms of being on academic probation, the negative feelings I felt within myself from being kicked out of a CSU, having to take that in my head at the time, step down. And so there was a lot of mental things that I was struggling with at that time. And then getting into the junior college system and trying to navigate that and find help. And similarly to what Rochelle was saying, with just having the experiences where you're looked at by this data and people referring to you by the things that you're coming to, and not getting the proper help, or finding groups. Like I didn't get acclimated to Umoja until I was on my way out. Again, all of the good gems happened by the time where I had already had a bunch of things I needed to unpack. But it was really challenging, and having that on your file and trying to work through that and find people and organizations or teams to help in the transitions seem very far and few between.
Thank you again, Ariana, for your generosity and sharing your experience with us. Unique, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so while I personally haven't been on academic probation, I've been close to it, because at College of San Mateo, you get a semester of a grace period. If it's your first time of failing a class, you get a grace period, and then if it happens again, then you go on it. And for me, I got on the grace period because like Rochelle said, it's when you hear about it, it's you feel like you're a criminal. And then I've had so many people in my cohort who, because of situations like, oh, they're now having to work a full-time job because of gentrification, or the fact that, oh, their parent got injured, or like the person who usually makes all the money in their house is now injured. So again, now they have to work full-time, or moving across like far, but you're already like in your second year here. So like you don't want to just move schools when you're already attached here. And for me, like when I got on my almost academic probation, I actually became homeless. So I wasn't worried about going to tutoring. I wasn't worried about, staying after class to go talk to my professor. I was worried about like, okay, I'm homeless now. What do I do? Who do I go to? Where do I go to eat? How do I like find out where I'm supposed to go? And luckily I was able to get in a shelter with my family, but it's just a matter of like now navigating the fact that, oh, do not have a house. Like I literally do not have a room. I don't have anywhere to study. I was just in like a depressive state. So it wasn't really anything a teacher could have done for me that would have made me feel any better about what's happening in real life. And so I'm just thankful for the fact that my community college had like, you're allowed to have like a semester where it's like, okay, it happened. What are we gonna do now? And I thought that was like nationwide, but I guess not. So I'm thankful for that. But no, I've seen what it does to people, and I've seen like I saw like half my cohort like almost drop out or did drop out because they got on academic probation because of outside influences, not even just things happening in the classroom.
Thank you, Unique. Really appreciate that. Before Darla asks you another question, I wanted to reference a question that we got in the chat, which was, do we have ideas for an alternative term to the term probation that's more supportive, less anxiety inducing? And I know we're going to put links to the briefs in the chat later, but Darla and I had a lot of conversation about this because one of our key recommendations is that the term probation needs to go. It needs to be renamed. And then some of our advisory committee said, well, okay, well, you have to give folks ideas for what to rename it. So was hoping to crowdsource actually everyone who is on this webinar today. If you have alternatives to the term probation that are more supportive, less anxiety inducing, feel free to send them our way, because we've got a couple. We put in academic warning, academic notice, but I'm sure there's more creative folks out there too. So please feel free to send them our way. Just wanted to throw that out there before Darla keeps going.
And I will add, we actually did Google it. We looked to see, and we only found one college. So if you also know of colleges or universities who are making this, but you know how you do it on Google, you try it this way, because you're trying to get that keyword or key phrase, and only one came up that had actually, made a change to this. So would love to hear from you of your ideas, or again, if you know places. And I said this idea also of like a grace period. I think that's something that we should probably consider as well. All right, so the next question is for Unique, which is talk to us about your experiences with faculty, when you were at the community colleges. How did that, kind of impact your transfer experience, your transfer success? Any, share positive, negative, whatever you want to share about your experience with the faculty.
So I'm just going to be completely honest. When I was in high school, I was what they call a firecracker child. If I didn't want to do anything, I wasn't going to do it. If I felt like a teacher was talking to me disrespectfully, I was arguing with them. And it's more like because I've been so used to faculty or staff treating me like I was a lost cause when I actually sit here and think about it now. Because I was never taught that I could like go above and beyond. I was taught that like, oh, you're just here to do the bare minimum and then like get your diploma and then figure it out. Like no one in my high school even taught me like how to apply for college. It took someone outside of my high school at a after school program I used to go to when I was younger to help me apply for community college. So I kind of came in to community college with this like, oh, I'm just going to be treated like a lost cause again. I'm just here to get my little AA. And I didn't even know what transferring was. I was just like, just to get an AA or like just figure out where I want to like go for university. But I remember joining things like EOPS and Emoja, and then it was like my first English class with my Emoja teacher, and he's assigning stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to do it, and I'm actually saying this, I'm voicing I don't want to do this, and he's laughing with me, and I'm like, what's funny? He's like, because you think you can't do this, and I was like, what do you mean I don't think you can do this? So he really sat with me after class, and he was like, why do you think you can't do our first assignment? And I've never had a teacher really sit there with only me and ask me why I can't feel like I had to do something. And I was like, and I really just started like telling him like, it's not I don't feel like I can't do it. It's just, why would I want to do it? And it's like, I've never had those sort of conversations or even had that kind of support before in academia without being like asking for it. And so, and it was also coming to community college was the first time I saw someone who was Black in a successful position. My high school didn't have Black teachers. They only had like Black substitutes, and you can't really talk with the teachers at subs because they're leaving after class or they're going to go do something after class. So it was the first time I actually saw that I can be Black and successful at the same time. And it's just, I finally was able to actually talk with all my professors, like ask them how was it even going through academia. I was asking them what was it like coming even like from another state here. And I've just never been able to ask those like kinds of questions because it's like, it's not to be that person, but what would be the point of me asking my teacher who's like, they've explained that they come from a happy home, they've come from money, and they're only teaching because they just felt like it and someone else supported their dream. I finally got to have professors who was like, I grew up dirt poor and I figured it out and I paved my way to become a doctorate. And I was like, and to me, I've never heard that before. So I'm like sitting here crying in class because I come from nothing. Again, I was homeless for one of my semesters. So finally being able to hear that you can start from nothing and end up with something was just something that mind boggled me. And I never forget like the day I became homeless. It was my professor, his name was Dr. Gaines at College of San Mateo. And he told me, he was like, life is going to hit you with a lot of things. And it doesn't even matter, like once you leave community college, life's going to hit you with some things. But the one thing you can't do is forget that you're here to do something. You can't sit here and forget that life is going to be hard regardless. It's a matter of like, what are you going to do after the feelings of sadness, after the feelings of anger, after all the frontal emotions? What do you do after that? And then that's why I just kept going, because I wasn't gonna just cry all day, give up on school, and then what? I wasn't gonna be mad. Then after the anger's gone, then what? So he really pushed me to just continuously go, and I don't think I would have gotten that without something like Emoja.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next question, because all of you participated in Emoja at some point or in your journey. And so we'd just love for you each to just take a minute or so to share what was that. I mean, you shared a little bit, but specifically, how did Emoja impact you? What did being in that program do to help you? And we'll go Rochelle, Ariana, and then Unique.
So for me, I kind of stumbled upon Emoja by accident. I was looking for some support in math and I needed a tutor. So I went to several different resources on campus to look for a tutor. Through my journey of looking for a tutor, I promised myself when I go back to school, when I go to school, I'm gonna treat it like church. I'm not joining anything. I'm just going to hear the word and I'm leaving. Like I had that in my mind that I was not gonna join anything at school. I'm gonna stay focused, get an education and leave. And that didn't last a month because I realized that it's humanly impossible to have a successful experience in school without joining and being a part of or having a support system. So that didn't last very long. So I stumbled upon Umoja because I was looking for a tutor. All the tutors that I was experiencing, I just didn't understand them. Like a lot of them just were really super smart. So my work was too easy for them. So they would start the process by saying, oh, this is easy. Let me take a look at this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I ran into a center that was, I guess it was a Hispanic center. And so I went in there, didn't know, didn't care. I just wanted to join something. And they're like, oh, you're probably looking for the other center. It's down the street around the ramp. I'm like, oh, okay. So the other center was the Emoji Center. I'm like, oh, okay, this is where the Black people are. That's not what I was looking for. I just wanted some help, but okay, I'll go where the Black people are. So I walked in this building and I believe someone was on break, or one was going on break, but there was a student worker. And she's like, well, I don't really have an answer, but there is a gentleman in the office you can talk to. So I kind of like bogarted my way in the clearance office, didn't have a meet appointment, didn't have a schedule. I just walked in. I'm like, he was open. He just got his breakfast. He was trying to sit down and eat. And I'm just like, I need help. I'm getting ready to go crazy. I am not doing well in math. I need help. You guys have tutors. He's like, well, yeah, there's tutors all over the campus. And I'm like, well, I went to all the places he referred me to, I had already visited. And I'm saying it's not successful. He's like, well, there's another program through EOPS. They may be able to work with you a little bit more. And so to make a long story short, my relationship from Emoji stems from math. I would have never ran into this organization if I wasn't struggling with math, because my focus was I'm going to school, I'm not joining anything, I need to stay focused. I have kids at home, I don't have time to be, I'm not a kid, so I can't be in the programs. And it was completely opposite of that. They literally took me in and wrapped themselves around my entire journey. I am like the spokesperson on campus. If I see someone, have you joined Emoji? Do you know about this program? Let me walk you. And I'm disabled. So I'm like, let's get on the tram with me. We can go to the Emoji program because there are people in there. Yes, they look like you, but beyond that, they can relate. They have a seat at the table, so they can show you how to get a seat at the table. And it's just been an experience where I didn't realize how important representation was. I really tried to focus on, I don't have to just be around Black people because I'm Black. I don't have to join this group because I'm Black. I didn't want that to be the focus. But at the end of the day, you need to be in a environment where you can study freely, you can cry freely, you can laugh freely and not be judged. And that is the reason why I am embedded in, I love EOPS, I love my disabled group. I'm even on the honors program. However, I feel safe and I feel valued every time I walk into the Emoji program. Busy or not, someone in there is gonna make themselves available. I missed 1 week from going in there because that's my study place. It's like my second home away from home. I missed a week and one of the staff members emailed me and said, we're just checking in to make sure you're okay. And that's when I realized they even miss me when I'm not there. So I really understand that it's bigger than just the Black students or the Black, African-American center. It is literally like home away from home a different way because my parents didn't go to school. So these people actually can relate to your school experience. So I really appreciate the program. Yeah.
Thank you, Rochelle. I said we're running out of times, but I do want to give Ariana wanted to share something really quick, and because I do want to make sure we do hear from our wonderful Umoja coordinators. So please go ahead, Ariana.
Okay, well, really quick, my relationship with Umoja really just stems from one thing that Unique said, and it's a term I hear in academia, the cura personalis, which just means the whole person. And Umoja focuses on understanding or having the understanding of the cultural competence support, being able to have someone or an entity to relate to who understands, has a different layer of support and appreciation as a woman and a person of color. Like I said before, my interaction with Umoja came closer to the end of my time at a junior college, but immediately I was connected to a person who reviewed my file and said, you're almost done and you only need 2 or 3 more things until you're finished. And had it not been for that conversation, I don't think I would have ever known when to wrap it up. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that, you know, I'm able to move on and go on to other things. And now being in nursing school, one of the concepts that were taught there that really closely resembles that of Umoja is to assess a person's needs is beyond what they may be coming in for. And like Umoja, that means that it's not just about you being on academic probation or having a failing grade. It's a community to really capture, you know, where you're coming from, you know, what baggage you're presenting with, and how they can help you in that time, but in moving forward to future successes. And that really makes a difference in academic success. So thank you to that program.
Thank you for both of you. So I'm going to ask our 2 coordinators to share with everyone a little bit about your particular program at your college and how you work with students and the impact that you see with the role that Umoja is playing in helping students be successful in their transfer goals. So who wants to go first? Whoever can.
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you, Mr. Banks. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm at Los Angeles Pierce College, and our Umoja program is really focused on a lot of the work that you've heard has been effective with the students. We're focused on the cognitive factors, the non-cognitive factors. We're focused in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So our program has learning community classes that are offered every semester, which some of our Umoja students are enrolled in. And then we have Umoja students that are not enrolled in the learning community classes and make use of our other resources. And for us, the priority is really on community. We believe that, you know, exactly what Rochelle spoke about earlier is incredibly important about having that support system on campus. We really believe in what Unique spoke about having somebody that sees you, the whole you, and understands your experiences. And we believe that a part of our success is really based in our authenticity. Our instructors and myself, our counselors, we really believe in being authentic and our true selves with students and sharing with our students some of the pitfalls and some of the successes that we've experienced when we were involved in higher education and beyond, and how we were able to overcome obstacles and also some opportunities that we have that we didn't take advantage of. And so we suffer the consequences for. And so overall, our program is just really focused on being that support system for students, where students have that place that they feel that they are at home, whether it's in our Umoja Village on campus, or whether it's with other Umoja students in the classroom or at activities, or with their Umoja counselors. So we're just incredibly fortunate to have the program and to have amazing students like Ariana and like, of course, Unique and Rochelle. It's just really and truly a blessing to be involved with the program and with these students. So turn it over to you, Mr. Banks.
Well, I just echo everything that you said. Really, I think we're, if you look at majority of our Umoja programs, we're doing the same thing. But one thing I do want to point out that I have this space is that we have to remember that our students are coming from all type of different experiences. And so our Umoja program is housed in our new Center for Black Culture and Student Success. And we want to be intentional about every single word that we use to name that center. And in particular, a lot of our students, because of their experiences, do not have the same relationship as, let's say, I did when it comes to Black culture. I grew up in a Black neighborhood with a Black mother and father, went to a Black school and had Black teachers, and never once did I feel bad about being Black or feel some type of negative connotation about being Black. But the majority of our students don't have that type of experience. And so it's important. The one thing that I think Umoja can do, that No Other Space can do, is that it gives our students, regardless of where they're coming from, an understanding of what true Black culture is. Okay, running around shooting each other, calling each other the N-word, putting each other down, that's not Black culture. Black culture is what you see in the Umoja program, when we uplift each other, when we love each other, when we hold each other accountable, when we support each other, even when our students hold us accountable as we are holding them accountable, all coming together in unity in the spirit of Umoja. And I think that's the great thing that separates Umoja from anything else. And so, so great work, Kalinda, and to all the students, because really embodying the spirit of what Umoja is.
Thank you so much. The other question that I have for you all is trying to, obviously you are in Umoja, but your colleges were selected to be a part of this part of the study, because when we looked at the data, your two colleges, along with a few others, kind of rose to the top in terms of when we looked at African-American students' transfer rates, right? So those students that are transferring. So are there things that you think are happening at your college, in addition to the Umoja program, that is really helping Black students be, successful in transfer?
Go ahead, Mr. Banks.
Okay, want me to go? I'll go first this time then. I think there are a couple of things that Mount San Antonio College does well. Number one, they're eager to listen to advice from Black faculty, staff, and students. Our leadership is constantly asking, what can we do? What do you think? How can we support Black students? So there's a willingness to listen. Now there is a listen action gap, meaning that the campus in some ways have been slow to implement all of the things that we've suggested, but there's been progress. For example, having a new Center for Black Students. Number two, I think Mount San Antonio College will allocate funds to support Black students in the transfer process, whether that is funding college tours, paying for food at transfer fairs or workshops so that students can get information and a meal, encouraging employees to give to the African American Scholarship through the foundation, increasing the number of counseling hours in the Center for Black Culture and Student Success. The financial commitment is there. Would we like to see a greater financial commitment? Of course, but a financial commitment is there. Number three, our campus encourages co-programming and encourages our Black students to get involved in multiple programs. For example, the Center for Black Culture and Student Success just collaborated with the Counseling Department and Transfer Center to offer transfer workshops specifically and intentionally for Black students that covered all of their transfer options, including the great options at HBCUs. We encourage our Black students, like Rochelle said earlier, to be involved with EOPS, Access, the honors program, athletics, as well as Umoja, understanding that the more support a student has at an institution, the more likely that student is going to persevere obstacles, graduate, and or transfer. So those are some of the things that we're doing outside of Umoja at Mount SAC, and I'm pretty sure that there's some other things that are happening at other colleges as well.
Great. So I'll talk about some other things that are happening at Pierce College. And I think Pierce College does a really amazing job in the faculty ranks with establishing a culture of transfer. So our transfer center director has provided dynamic leadership in terms of really making sure that disciplined faculty, instructional faculty and non-instructional faculty are really aware of the transfer process, of important dates and deadlines, ways they can support transfer students. And within the counseling department, no matter what program or area the counselor works for, we have an established culture that every counselor is a transfer counselor. So we are all expected, and we all embrace the opportunity to be aware of all of the requirements for transfer at the many different institutions. And our department invests a significant amount of time towards professional development to ensure that we're knowledgeable and well-equipped to serve the students, so that no matter which counselor a student encounters, they are ready and prepared to help them with the transfer process. In addition to that, our instructional faculty are really quite fantastic here at Pierce College, and they have a number of partnerships with partner universities and colleges for grants and other programs to help facilitate the transfer process and also inspire and encourage students in the various major specific areas that they're interested in. So it makes the transfer process that much more seamless and also that much more interesting and encouraging. So the students are excited about transfer. And so we have a variety of ways we do that. Unfortunately, we don't have time for all of that. But I just want to say in particular at Pierce College, I think a lot of the work that's being done amongst the faculty are some of the reasons why we have been able to enjoy such success with transfer, and specifically for Black and African American students.
Wonderful. All right, as we get near the end here, we did have one more question. I just want to open it up to the group. And also, if there's anything you wanted to share that we didn't ask, because sometimes things occur to you after the fact. But the question that we had was about belonging, and the role of belonging playing into your college experience, and if you wanted to share anything about, again, from the practitioner perspective, how does belonging kind of fit in the intentional piece, the role that plays, and then maybe from a student experience, the role that played, and what made you feel like you belonged. It sounds like Umoja got that answer, but were there other, kind of people, other programs, other things? And again, what was the importance? What role did that play in your success? So anyone want to go first?
I can start.
Yes, please.
So outside of Umoja, I also talked about being at EOPS, and I think the clear thing was reminding us all, like, it doesn't matter where you came from, either regionally wise, state wise, academic wise, money wise, that you had a place on the campus. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand how good that feels to not be judged on where you came from or how you got here or like what your financial background is, but like who you are as a person and what you're bringing when you walk through the doors. And I'm not saying that nobody talks about this enough, but I truly feel like when I come to school, the last thing I'm trying to worry about is whether or not I have the best clothes to come in, whether or not I'm speaking correctly so that someone's not going to judge me, whether or not someone's gonna dislike how I'm dressing because I'm not fitting into societal norms. And I feel like at my community college, especially when I walked through those doors, the only thing people thought of was just how kind I was, like how helpful I was, how supportive I was. I was all based on my personality and what I brought to the table and not what my background was.
Go ahead.
If I can, let me, if I can touch on something from a practitioner standpoint, for all of us that are full-time employees at the community college. I think the one thing is we talk about belonging. I want to focus on the thing we call values. You want to show me what a college values. I'll show you what your college spends money on. And I think I'd be remiss if we were in this space and we're sharing this space and recording and it's going to go out if we didn't really make the statement that if institutions are really serious about Black student success and the transfer tipping point for Black students, then make a financial commitment to Black student success. And the question is, I often get is, well, what does that look like? Well, number one, first, you have to hire the right Black managers, faculty members, and classified employees who love Black students and who value Black student success. That's number one. Number two, establish a Black Student Success Center managed by a Black manager, where you have Black counselors, where you have Black support staff that's there, that's charged with programming, effective programming to address the needs and services of Black students. Number three, allocate funding in addition to, those district funded positions for those extra programming, such as HBCU tours and local college tours, guest speakers. If you can't see it, then you don't know you can be it, right? And so it's really important that we expose our Black students at the community college level to all type of options, so that they know that they can major in other things than just the typical majors that we are here about. And so for me, it's important that we make the financial commitment, that we actually allocate the money. We say we value this, then let's actually allocate some money and some funds to that. And that will let me know as a practitioner that my efforts are valued by the institution. I think it will let the students know that they belong, because the institution is putting these human and financial resources towards their academic success. And then, as Kalinda said, also to ensure that everyone on campus knows that, African-American transfer tipping point, Black student success is not just the responsibility of Black people, but of all people, for the entire institution. So if we're going to be an institution of higher learning, whatever your college name may be, then we all need to have, all of our efforts, every employee, regardless of skin color, race, creed, whatever it may be, to be committed towards Black student success. If we have that, then your school will be able to be highlighted throughout the entire nation for the great things that they'll be doing. True Black student success.
Thank you for bringing up that point. Yes, let's snap, let's clap, because the other thing that I was going to mention earlier, and I had it and I lost it, and now you brought it back for me, is that yes, we need more Black faculty, we need more counselors, we need more instructors, we need more administrators, we need all of those things, and we need to provide that representation for our students. But we do not want to communicate that Black students are the sole responsibility of those Black faculty, those Black administrators, and those Black classified professionals. They are everyone's responsibility. But what's happening, at least on some campuses, is that kind of like, oh, they got this. I don't have to worry about them. They got this. And it's like, no, that's not how this works.
No. And racial battle fatigue is real. Racial battle fatigue is real. And that's how it happens, where every single Black student now becomes your sole responsibility, and it's the institution's responsibility. And it's our job to hold the institutions accountable.
Yes. All right. Well, we are
Yeah, that takes
right
me
up
to
against it. Yes, please go ahead. Ariana.
I was just going to say that takes me to what point I was going to say was just overall culturally competent counseling, not just culturally competent people, but the counseling that is blanketed to every individual, whether you are a Black person or of some other racial descent, to be able to assist these students that come in and need guidance. It's beyond just having a representative. It's now an obligation that each counselors should partake in, where they are becoming competent in the things that are imperative to this success, being that the data represents that there are clear gaps and imbalances in how African-American Black students receive equitable education.
Thank you. I just want to thank you. That was so fantastic. I wish we had another 3 hours. No, maybe probably not 3 hours. Okay. Just so thankful for your participation, your grace, your generosity to with your time and your stories and the work that you have done, are doing, will do in support of our African-American students. You'll see here, these are the 3 briefs. We put the links in the chat. We thank you all for being here. We hope that this was informative and hopefully inspiring, and serve as a call to action of how we can help our African-American students. But thank you for your time today.